Hey guys, welcome. I hope you all are doing okay. Hope you guys are having a good morning so far. But yeah, as you can see, I am here at home and I will be going over the notes today. So we're going to begin today's section with 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6, all having to deal with interactions within the colonies. However, one of the things that you'll notice about each of these, they're kind of short, but it's not too bad. This will give you guys plenty of time to finish up the SAQ afterwards, which will be on Bacon's Rebellion. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started here today. So we're going to be beginning with transatlantic trade. So one of the things that we have to realize, number one, is that the world order is going to fundamentally change. Everything is going to change during this period of time due to the integration of the colonies in North America and South America, but it is going to be integrated into the European economy. And the thing is, it is going to develop a new network, a new system of trade, and what we call the triangular trade. So you're going to have the triangles, the 3 points essentially of the colonies, Europe, as well as Africa. Now you can probably guess what the network of exchanges, what it's going to look like. So we know that there are going to be raw resources coming out of the colonies being sent over to Europe. And in return, Europe is going to be sending over new products over to be sold to the colonies and the like. And from Africa, we pretty much know what is going to be coming over, that in the form of human trafficking and slavery. So these slaves will be brought over from Africa, especially over to the West Indies and into Brazil especially. But essentially, it is going to lay as the foundation for this entire system of triangular trade, because without these slaves, the Europeans, they feel they would not be able to extract the resources that are coming out of the Americas in order to make them lots and lots of money. Now, this overall system, what it is boiled down to, is a system known as mercantilism. Basically, the idea is that a country is valuable and is wealthy if it's able to export a lot more than it imports. So for many of the European powers, Spain and especially England and France, they are looking to bring resources into their countries, turn them into a bunch of new products, thanks to what will soon be the Industrial Revolution, and be able to make these giant, enormous stashes of wealth and power, which they can then use to fund their militaries in order to grow their power even more and gain more access to more resources, which can then turn into more products. Now, essentially, all that the colonies exist for is to support the main nation. So the American colonies, in this case of what our focus is, it only exists to make Britain rich, to make France rich. That's the only reason why they are there. They're not there, out of goodness and like we're going to be explorers and find this new world. No, it is because there are items in this new world that allows for the host country, the home country, to become wealthy. That is it. That is the sole reason. Now, as we look at this map here, what I want you guys to kind of focus on. So we're going to begin first into the Americas. All right. Now, as we can see, coming out of North America, goods like rice, silk, indigo, tobacco, they are going to make their way to England. Whale oil, lumber, furs. These are going to be the good also coming out of the Caribbean here, sugar, molasses, and wood. All of these resources are going to be brought back to England. So we're going to focus on the English part of the triangular trade. So they're going to take in all of these resources, and England is going to ship back manufactured goods, luxury items of the like. But the whole point is they're going to take these basic resources, turn them into finished products which are much more expensive and sold much more expensive than what their core parts are, and then sell them right back to the colonies. Because the reason why England wants more people over in the colonies is not only to gather more resources, but in a sense, it creates more customers, more people to buy its goods than just what's available in Europe and the like. It is simply just more customers and more people to make the products and thereby buy the products. Now, over to Africa, we do see the exchange of guns, cloth, iron, and beer, so products that would come into especially sub-Saharan Africa. And then coming out of Africa, of course, gold, ivory, spices, and hardwoods, these things would make their way to Europe. But the bulk export out of Africa is, of course, going to be slaves, especially into the West Indies, as this is where we see the majority of sugarcane being produced, into the Caribbean as well as into Brazil. And then coming out of the Caribbean, many of those slaves will then make their way into the United States. Now, the allure of the colonies, what that would inevitably lead to is the British especially beginning to crack down on their trade. So, in 1670 and 1673, the British would enact what are known as the Navigation Acts. Essentially, what this did was it mandated that trade with the British colonies had to be on British ships. It had to have British crews. So everything was going to make money for only the British. The Spanish were not going to be able to make money off the English colonies. The French sure as hell wouldn't be allowed to make money. It only allows for the colonies to make money for the British. So, essentially what this does is two things. One, it does provide some benefits in the fact that, one, the colonies will now be protected from possible attacks by Spanish or French merchants. And two, is that it's going to make England a lot of money. That's mainly the benefit, is that England's going to be the one to make the sole profit here. Now, the issue then becomes, like, how realistic is it able to actually be enforced? And the answer is, well, not really. So they're not really properly enforced, as, again, the Atlantic Ocean is quite big, so not exactly a lot of ability for the English to really enforce the prevention of other ships from coming in. And even then, should there actually be officials there to put a stop to it, they are very easily bribed, which means that this isn't really going to matter much. It's just more the idea behind it. And the thing is, too, Britain is a lot more occupied with what's going on in Europe, and even later on, as we'll see, within their own country, because those are much more pressing matters than the colonies. Now, all that said, they are going to begin to notice when the colonies get a bit too out of hand, so to speak. So, for example, when Massachusetts Bay Colony begins to try and assert more of its own self-rule, that is going to lead King James II to take control back. He's actually going to disrupt the colony entirely, and basically merge it with the other ones that we see in England, so things like Connecticut, New Hampshire. And he is going to combine them into a single colony known as the Dominion of New England. Essentially, King James II did not like that they were beginning to form their own assemblies, pass their own laws, act on their own, so as such, King James is going to see to it that that simply just does not happen. Now, the thing is, so anything that was being given to the colonies at this point, or in particular that of New England, was stripped away. However, much of this would then later be negated and removed altogether thanks to the Glorious Revolution of 1688, which would see the rise of a new royal line in England and also the return of the colonies back to their previous holdings and the just complete forgetfulness of the Dominion of New England actions ever taking place. Now, that brings us to topic 2.5. So, how did things go between American Indians and Europeans, as you can probably guess? Alright, so we're going to begin first in New England. Now, the thing is, the English, as we can tell, due to their system of mercantilism, due to the idea that, again, they want more resources, which means they're going to need more land, is going to lead to then having a lot more conflicts with Native Americans than, say, the French or Dutch did. So, the thing is, that means they're not going to so much be fighting the French and the Dutch for land, they're going to be fighting the Native Americans because they're the ones who are actively living on the land and doing it. Now, The thing is, this would lead to a beginning of military action, what was called the New England Confederation in 1643. So, while trying to build a colonial military to kind of deal with these kinds of issues, later on the King of England's like, yeah, never mind, we're just going to go ahead and mind this. Now, the thing is, there is going to be war. So Native Americans are tired of the English coming to their territory, taking their territory, so that is going to lead to a conflict led by Metacom, the chief of the Wampanoag. So they're going to fight against the English colonists. They'll fight against the New England Confederation, as we talked about before. Now, the thing is, the Native Americans are going to be defeated. New England Confederation is a bit too much. They have better weapons, more resources, more manpower, and as such, they're able to defeat the Wampanoag. And that will pretty much be the end of Native Americans fighting against New England colonists. Now, that's not to say that will be the end of it, because again, we still have the rest of American history to go through here, but in terms of New England colonists, that's pretty much it. Now, in Virginia, we have the events of Bacon's Rebellion, which is quite interesting. Now, Nathaniel Bacon, the leader of the aforementioned revolution, he is a West Virginia farmer, and he does not like the fact that the governor of Virginia is not actively protecting them, that he's not giving them, military resources and the like. And as such, he is actually going to lead attacks against the natives themselves. So some natives were allied with the governor that they would coexist, cooperate. However, Bacon would begin to attack them. That would then lead to Governor Berkeley, his name. He gets declared as essentially being a traitor, that he's going against the governor's actions, he's going against the governor's allies. And the interesting thing is, when they try and subdue Bacon, Bacon wins. So Bacon is able to defeat the governor's forces. However, unfortunately, Bacon would succumb to a terrible disease known as dysentery. If you ever played Oregon Trail, you know how this ends, and yeah, it is not the best way to go. Now, ultimately, what this kind of leads to is that Bacon's rebellion isn't so much important in the sense of Bacon and the events. So the military that he created to fight against the natives falls apart with him gone, so that ends the resistance and like the further attacks against Native Americans. But what it does represent, and what is much more important, is this idea that there is distrust with colonial government and what the colonists themselves are going to be willing to do about it. In this case, and what we'll see much further on as well, that they are going to be willing to fight about it. And that is the key thing, that the colonists are going to be willing to fight and take up arms, not only against Native Americans, but also against the government that is there to rule and protect order there. Now, lastly here, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Spanish continuing to attack people. So the Spanish, they had ruled in the southwestern United States, and this would lead to events known as the Pueblo Revolt, where multiple groups of natives, such as the Hopi, the Zuni, and among others, they would revolt against the Spanish. Now, as you might imagine, the Spanish were trying to forcibly convert them to Christianity. They were not having it. This would lead to then open fighting, and then due to the technological and military superiority of the Spanish would very easily put down that revolution. Alright, so lastly here for today's lesson, we will now go over slavery in the British colonies, which I think y'all can kind of figure this one out. Alright, so the thing is, as we talked about before, Jamestown, what saved the colony was the cultivation of tobacco. Now, as they made that their primary economic driver, that's what they're going to need workers for. They can't get the workers. The reason why, one, as you might imagine, no one really wants to work for low pay. Um, so the work isn't worth what people are making. Second, the disease, the conditions of the colony itself, disease, starvation, fighting with natives. It is not the best place. So, like, sure, you could go there, but for what? Why am I going to suffer all these things for a job that doesn't pay me well? Now, originally, they are too poor to afford slaves. So, basically, they are going to turn to what's known as the head right system. Basically, they will attract people to come and work in the colonies, in Virginia in this case. You work as an indentured servant for a period of time, and then afterwards you would then be released from said work and be given land or other resources in order to begin your life. But as you might imagine, not a lot of people are exactly willing to go ahead and come by and do that. So, with all the avenues exhausted, the British turned to slavery. Now, as I had mentioned before in the triangular trade, the majority of slaves are going to be brought over to the West Indies and Brazil. 95% of all slaves are going to come to those areas. And it is from there that the English will begin to import the slaves into the British colonies. Now, in 1619, we would see the first indentured servants. So Africans, they were not originally slaves, but they'd be brought over as indentured servants. However, then the legislature in Virginia, what was known as the House of Burgesses, they make it so that Africans can be permanently enslaved. So the whole idea of setting Africans free is gone, and now the systematic importation and development of the system of slavery is now done. Now, the thing is, as you might imagine, the idea of slavery becomes a bit more palatable when colonists, and especially those who are cultivating tobacco, see the benefits of it. Number one, it leads to a reduction in migration to the colonies, so now you're not having as many people come over and competing for land. So that was advantageous to the landowners because they didn't want people, coming in and taking up more land. They can just keep it for themselves. Second, they now have a dependable workforce. And third, it's essentially low cost. And by low cost, I don't mean that they're paying the workers. That's not why it's low cost. It's that, in taking care of workers, you only have to do so much. So rather than have a salary, you just keep them there. And that's what keeps it low cost. So they find themselves able to make a lot of money. And as such, that will be what it is. Now, we will continue next time. All right. So we'll wrap up with colonial society and culture. We'll finish that up for Thursday's class. So hope you all enjoyed this. And remember, now go ahead and complete your SAQ. And I will see you all in a couple of weeks. Later, guys.